One day, as the snow began to fall, a lone wolf appeared. It was injured and limping, and it looked like it was about to die. But as the wolf collapsed, the orb transformed into the wolf. It had gained consciousness and was now experiencing the world as a real wolf. As the wolf continued to walk through the snowy tundra for a few weeks, it eventually stumbled upon a ghost town where a boy lived alone. The town had been abandoned by adults who had left 5 years ago in search of a paradise beyond the endless sea of white tundra. The boy was overjoyed to see the wolf and called it by name, Joan, happy that it had remembered him after being gone for 2 months. However, the boy quickly realized that Joan wasn't acting normal, so he took the wolf into his house. Inside the house, Joan took in everything around him, the sounds, the smells, and the warmth. If the wolf could speak, it would probably have said, "I want to stay here forever." The boy tried to feed Joan, but it refused to eat. The boy and the wolf went outside to gather wood for their fire. The boy went to a nearby house and cut down some wood. He explained to the wolf that he was borrowing the wood from other people, but he also felt guilty for taking it without asking. He knew that if the owners of the house were to come back, they would be angry with him for stealing. However, he also understood that he needed the wood to survive. The other villagers had left 5 years ago, searching for a paradise beyond the endless sea of white tundra, and promised to return. The boy wanted to go with them, but he was told to stay behind and care for his grandparents. While heading back, they heard a noise coming from inside the house. The boy hoped that it was one of the villagers who had finally returned, but it turned out to be a fish on the end of his fishing line. He quickly retrieved the fish and they ate it raw to save some fuel. The boy noticed that Joan had refused to eat again. He wondered if the wolf had forgotten how to eat. So, he showed Joan how to eat, and the wolf immediately mimicked his actions. That night, the boy drew pictures of the other villagers on the wall of their home. He explained to Joan that he was doing this so that he wouldn't forget about the people who used to live in the ghost town. He wanted to remember them and keep their memories alive. The boy then confided in Joan that he was thinking about leaving the town to see the world and experience new things. The boy and the wolf went south. After hours of walking, they came across a marker that told them to continue heading forward. They followed the markers and continued on their journey, finding more and more markers as they went. After about 5 days of walking, the boy found a bush that he believed proved they were getting closer to the mountains. Just as they were about to continue, the boy slipped and fell into the water, injuring his leg. He tended to his injury and tried to reassure himself that it was just a flesh wound and that he could keep going. However, as the days passed, the boy was losing strength. He couldn't continue walking for long periods of time, and his injury was starting to swell. But he was determined to keep going, convinced that turning back now would be foolish. He reassured himself that they couldn't have much farther to go and that he would be able to overcome the pain. Just as the boy was convincing himself that they were close to paradise, he spotted broken-down wagons from the other villagers. He tried to remain optimistic and told the wolf that paradise couldn't be far away now. However, he broke down into tears, asking Joan if they could make it to the mountains. But when the wolf didn't respond, the boy became frustrated, wondering why his friend wasn't answering him. He cried even harder, realizing that Joan couldn't respond and that he had been talking to himself the whole time. He apologized to the wolf and made the difficult decision to turn back and go home. Once arriving back home, the boy cried himself to sleep. The next morning, he woke up with a fever and checked on his infected wound. Despite feeling weak and sick, the boy told himself that he would heal and that they would try to find the mountains again. However, the boy's fever only got worse, and he grew weaker by the day. He could barely get out of bed, and he knew that he was running out of time. One night, he struggled to get to his chair and asked the wolf to remember him. He laid back in his chair, losing consciousness. The boy dreams about himself among all the other villagers, traveling to find the mountains they had been searching for. They eventually reached their paradise, where they found other people and a world full of wonders. Meanwhile, the boy's body fell to the ground, and the wolf tried to get him to move, but he was unsuccessful. The wolf tried it harder, grabbing hold of the boy's coat, and immediately began taking on the form of the boy. The wolf then realized that his friend was gone and knew that he had to fulfill the boy's wish of exploring the world. He left in search of more stimulations to evolve, determined to discover the world and all its mysteries in honor of his beloved friend. After parting ways with the boy, the immortal orb continued its journey south, crossing the mountain. Despite taking on the form of a human, the orb lacked the characteristics of a human. It didn't know how to eat, hunt, or even sense danger, which caused it to die 6 times in a row. But with each subsequent death, the time it took to regenerate grew shorter. By the 6th time, it only took 12 hours. After walking for a while, the immortal being reached a plateau from which it could oversee a beautiful valley covered in forests. The view was breathtaking, literally. Suddenly, the immortal being was attacked and killed by a large bear, which threw it into a nearby pond. As the immortal being regenerated itself, a young girl named March watched in fear from afar. He couldn't believe what she was seeing, and she wondered who or what the immortal being was. Curious and intrigued, March followed the immortal being as it walked away from the pond. She tried to engage the being in conversation, but it remained silent and unresponsive. March started to get annoyed and concluded that the being must be hungry. March climbed a tree to grab some fruit and offered it to the immortal being, who only knew how to eat like an animal, getting on its hands and knees to bite the fruit. March wondered if the immortal being had never been taught how to eat properly and decided to teach it herself. Realizing that the immortal being was really hungry, March climbed the trees and started throwing fruits at it. The immortal being ate every single fruit that was tossed at it. March tried to teach the immortal being how to say thank you, but it was unsuccessful. Despite this, she felt a connection to the being and continued to travel with it. They rested for the night, and March dreamed of returning to her parents. But even in her dreams, she realized that her sisters were missing. As March looked around, she saw her sisters being eaten by a huge spirit bear. As it turned out, March had been chosen by the shaman to be sacrificed to the spirit bear, who protected the village in exchange for a sacrifice. Fortunately, her friend Parona helped her to escape from the Yanome guards while she was being taken to the sacrificial altar. This was how March found the immortal being. March woke up in a cold sweat, haunted by the memory of the spirit bear and the sacrifice that had almost been made. She decided that she needed to leave. The immortal woke up and decided to follow her. March wondered if it was hungry and gave it more fruit to eat, while jokingly saying she was his mother. March gave the immortal being a name, Fushar, meaning immortality. However, Hayes, one of the Yanome guards who had originally escorted March to the site, eventually found her. Despite March's reluctance to leave Fushar behind, she collapsed after eating some food given to her by Hayes, stating that every girl sacrificed to the spirit bear eats it. While searching for March, Parona encountered Fushar and asked if he had seen a little girl. Fushar led her to the sacrificial site, where preparations for the ritual were already underway. But suddenly, a giant bear with spikes on its body appeared. Parona desperately tried to untie March from the sacrificial altar, but the giant bear attacked her. The Yanome guards were closing the gate, sealing them all inside. Just as hope seemed lost, Fushar arrived on the scene, fearlessly facing down the monstrous bear. With one swift bite, the bear clamped its jaws around Fushar's head, but the immortal being refused to give up, struggling to escape from the bear's grasp. Fushar transformed into his wolf form and began to bite and attack the bear, developing his intellectual abilities as he fought. He used his newfound knowledge to bait the bear into attacking, only to dodge and bite the bear's nose. Despite the bear's powerful attacks, Fushar regenerated his body at an incredible speed, finally defeating the beast. Witnessing the epic battle, Hayes decided to untie March and take them to Yanome for their safety. Fushar, unable to return to his human form, approached March, who gave him some fruit to eat. In a heartwarming moment, Fushar spoke his first words, thanking March for her kindness. The group continued on their journey to Yanome, but their newfound knowledge about the truth behind the spirit bear ritual weighed heavily on their minds. When they finally met the shaman who had chosen March to be sacrificed, she revealed that the whole thing was a scam, concocted by Yanome to manipulate and invade the villagers' land. Parona was devastated, revealing that her sister had died because of the ritual. But just as they were reeling from this shocking news, Fushar suddenly threw up, forcing them to stop by a nearby river to wash up. As Fushar looked at his reflection in the water, he suddenly remembered the boy telling him to always remember him and transformed back into his human form. March immediately embraced him, declaring that she would be his mother from now on. As they arrived in Yanome, the group set out to explore the city. March couldn't help but feel a sense of longing when she saw a happy family, reminding her of her own. As they walked, March spotted a post office and decided to send a letter to her parents. But there was a problem: her parents couldn't read or write. March thought of a solution and simply pressed her hand on the paper, claiming that it meant she was doing fine. However, the biggest challenge was that they didn't know the location of their village. Hayes took them out to eat at a local restaurant. But as they ate, the group suddenly fell unconscious. Fushar and the group wake up in separate prison cells confused. Fushar sees Hayes talking to some unknown people, and another prisoner is dragged into Fushar's cell to attack him. The man was ordered to kill Fushar, thinking he'll be released from his charges. However, Fushar sakers the guy with his monstrous regeneration. The guards then attack him, but Fushar transforms into his wolf form and escapes. Unfortunately, Hayes shoots him with an arrow. March wakes up and finds Fushar trapped inside a bag beside her. Hayes orders March to teach Fusher how to understand human speech, and Parona appears to ask if there's anything in their cell so they can escape. March gives her the arrow that came from Fusher's body. Fusher gets up and begins to dig a way out. After escaping, Fusher discovered he could choose what form to transform into by recalling past experiences that stimulated him. While searching for a way out, Fusher stumbled upon the spirit bear and overheard it saying it was in pain, revealing to be an orb just like him. March sees arrows stuck in the bear's body and hides when she hears Hayes approaching. Hayes decides to make March look after the bear, which she does with care and compassion. While hugging the bear, March tells it that they are alike and that they are just normal on their own. To her surprise, the bear responds with a thank you before taking its last breath. Later that night, a guard approaches March's cell and reveals herself to be Parona. She tells March that they are going to break out of prison. She didn't just help them, but she also helped the old shaman woman. March said goodbye to the spirit bear before they left, and Parona gave the key to the old woman. Parona tries to cut the bear, hoping to use it as proof to stop the village's cruel ritual of sending children to their deaths. But March can't stand to see the bear hurt, and he stops Parona, telling her it's too cruel. Parona argues that it's necessary to show the villagers that the bear is dead so they'll stop the ritual. But March is scared and reminds Parona that the bear is not their protector. Seeing how scared March is, Parona decides to change her plan and simply talk to the villagers. The group manages to escape the prison on a wagon and head back to the village. But their journey home is far from smooth. They're ambushed by Hayes and her guards who demand that they hand over Fusher. But March and Parona refuse to give in, determined to protect their friend. Parona fights back fiercely, but Hayes tries to shoot Parona. March jumps in to defend her friend and takes the arrow herself. March is badly hurt, and Parona tries her best to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, Fusher transforms into a powerful bear and goes on a rampage, attacking Hayes in a fit of rage. As March struggles to stay alive, she tells Parona that she should become Fusher's mother in her place. Parona does her best to reassure March that everything will be okay and that they just need to get back home. March asks about Fusher, and Parona confirms that he was with them. March smiles happily, tears in her eyes, but then takes her last breath. Parona is heartbroken but carries March's body and starts making her way back home. Meanwhile, Fusher is still in danger as the guards attack him, but he fights back fiercely, determined to protect his friends. As Parona approaches, Fusher transforms back into his human form. Parona thanks him for fighting for March, and Fusher looks at her, his eyes filled with sadness. In a dream, March sees herself finally able to go back home to her parents. She's grown up and happy, playing with her dolls. But as she looks at her dolls, March suddenly remembers Fusher and realizes that she's died. She breaks down, crying and pleading that she doesn't want to die. Parona, who is also grieving, takes the sharp object and brings it close to her throat, saying that she'll join March soon. But as Parona prepares to end it all, March begs Fusher to save her friend. Fusher knows that this isn't what March would want, and he stops Parona. Together, they set off back to the village, determined to find a way to keep March's memory alive and honor her wishes. When Parona and Fusher finally arrive back in the village, March's mother approaches Parona, asking where she's been for the past 6 months. Parona hands her a letter with March's handprint on it and assures her that March is doing just fine. March's parents are shocked and overwhelmed with tears, giving Parona a big hug. But their tragic moment is short-lived as they hear that the Yanom is heading towards their village. Parona knows that Fusher is in danger and tells him to run and live his life on his own terms. Fusher transforms into a wolf and takes off, leaving Parona behind. As he's moving, Fusher catches the scent of delicious fruit and transforms into March.